Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's really nice to see you. Has everybody come through that we think are coming through? Does somebody know the answer to that? Are we all here? It's very nice to see you all. Welcome. Welcome to the common room. How many of you have been here before? Loads. Fantastic. So for those that haven't been here before, welcome. It's an amazing space. It's a space where visionaries and innovators have been meeting for 150 years, so we hope we carry on that tradition in some way. There's plenty of ways you can find out more about the space. We're going to, balance up a little the gender balance here in the room, so we can all pay homage to Catherine up there, who's struggling on this side of the wall at least. In the corner here, you will see an exhibition from our artists. They will tell you a little bit more about it as we go through the programme now. So welcome. A little bit of housekeeping. Not my house, so somebody correct me if I get the bits wrong. We're not expecting a fire tonight, or indeed a fire alarm or a fire. If you hear the alarm, please leave the building, but amass on the pavement. We know who's here, so we can see who's left in the building if that's the case. If you need the loos, you go out of the room and you turn right and you turn right again. There are refreshments outside, and afterwards you're more than welcome to come back to our space at D6 to carry on the conversations with the artists and with IZOLYATSIA and our colleagues here. So I'm going to make a start. Bear with me, there's lots of things to hold. I'll do my best. So it's brilliant to have you here for Regrounding. This is a project that had its genesis in the industrial heartland of eastern Ukraine. Then the Russians invaded. So we spent a little bit of time with our partners reshaping it to bring it here to the engine room of the Industrial Revolution in the northeast of England. So our artists will be responding to this space here, and we'll hear from them in a little bit. This is a programme that has been supported by the British Council's Ukraine, UK, is it in that order? UK, Ukraine season. And we're delighted to have Anna here, Anna Buvnova from the British Council in Kiev joining us today. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more about it, please afterwards come and talk to Anna, and she can say a little bit more about this programme. It worked. So we're co-hosting this evening with IZOLYATSIA, who will tell us a little bit more about their programme as we go through this programme. And we're going to hear from our two artists who've been in residence with us in D6, round the corner from here. So Karolina, Uskakovych, oh, there you are. She's here. And Alexandra Krolikowska. I practice all night. I got it wrong. Who are going to let you know a little bit more about their work soon. So they've been responding to this industrial heritage, both in Ukraine and here in the UK. And their journeys have been personal, they've been public, and they've been considering the environmental impact of this work. So I'm Clemeni Cristoforo. I'm a director of D6 Culture in Transit. We're visual arts producers. I know some of you in the room, and others I'm seeing for the first time, so welcome, it's nice to see you. We are visual arts producers based in Charlotte Square, so just a 5-minute walk from here in the centre of town. We have a long programme of bringing artists to the region. We've been around for 25, maybe even 30 years. We're based, as we say, in Charlotte Square. We have this very long programme of bringing artists that whose work considers the threads that we can draw, which are both social and environmental, with colleagues internationally. So connecting the northeast of England to the rest of the world and looking at the issues that we share and that concern us. So a quick fly through a couple of our programmes. I wanted to hold this one up, so if you haven't seen this map before, it's quite extraordinary. Our programme Contested Desires, which has just finished, was a 4-year Creative Europe programme which looked at the impact of European colonisation on culture today. Extraordinary to look at those colours. A piece of work here is by a beautiful artist called Mia Georgis, whose work was shown as part of an exhibition in this region at the Lytton Phil, and some of you might have seen that again just next door. So as an organisation, we connect really locally here. We work very closely with local partners in addition to working with our international partners. Another quick slip of a project here is Future Past with Henna. I've seen Henna in the room somewhere. Hello, Henna. So this project, Hannah's been working with us for a while on this project, and she's been working along Hadrian's Wall. So again, drawing threads between migration and occupation when the Romans were here through to today, and breaking down some of the barriers for access to the countryside. And this is a very beautiful project that Hannah will be completing later on in the year. This was a part of the installation before Christmas. And the final example of a project is ACT. So this is a program where we're trying to understand from others. A lot of our program in the past year or so has been working with artists in exile. So in the UK, we have refugees, we have those seeking asylum, but as do many, many other countries. So what can we learn from other countries that are working with artists in exile? So here we partner with partners in Istanbul, in Jordan and in France. And just a quick slide there looking at the ACT project when it came to the UK in November, December, and we had a program with the Star and Shadow. This is the worst bit. You've got all these things to hold and glasses that you should probably take off at this point to see what you're doing. Okay. So working in partnership is really key to us. So we began at D6 our journey with Ukraine and with Ukrainian cultural organisations in 2015. And if you think 2015 was just a year or so after the end of the Maidan Revolution, we met some really interesting organisations. We first met the British Council there, and I first met the director of IZOLYATSIA, our partner here, Oksana Sarjevska there. So I'm not going to spend much more time talking about us. I'm delighted that you're all here. You're going to hear tonight from other people a little bit more, in a bit more detail than me. And I'm going to now, I think, hand you over to Mikhailo Gluboki. Misha.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for coming today. It's great to see a large number of people who decided to join this meeting. And it's also a huge privilege to be here in this beautiful building, in this mining institute, which is soaked with the history of Industrial Revolution and has really strong connection to a background of my region where I come from. So I represent, I represent the IZOLYATSIA Foundation. It's an organization that just a second. Yes, organization that was founded in 2010 in Donetsk, in the very east of Ukraine, in an area which is a big industrial region of the country full of different factories and mines. So really similar to history of Newcastle and this region. So it was founded in Donetsk, a huge industrial city, which is more than 1 million inhabitants, which was actually built around big metal factories. So basically the huge steel plant was in the middle of the city, and around the city you would have living blocks built. And this region in general has really interesting history and really close ties with Europe and United Kingdom, because Donetsk itself was founded by a Welsh entrepreneur, and the whole region started really rapid development in 19th century when the industrialization started, and people from all across the Europe came there to start their new businesses. So you would have a lot of Belgium capital, people coming from Italy, from Germany, from Great Britain. Everyone wanted to build something new and to start new business there. When Soviets came, of course they removed all this story and said that it's only thanks to Soviet Union the industry was built. But in general, they continued this process of industrialization, and the whole region became basically dedicated to only one thing: production of metal, heavy industry, chemical production and different sorts of factories. So lots of cities in the region are basically built around factories. You would have a small factory with chemical production, and then you would have people live around this factory who would work there, and there is nothing else to do in those cities. And our history starts in one of those factories, factory called IZOLYATSIA. The name comes from the production. It's insulation materials, mineral wool, which was used to insulate pipes in submarines. So it has a really different purpose. So the factory was founded in 1955, and it was experimental. They wanted to use slag heaps, this result of mining, to be reused again for the purposes of production of insulation materials. Unfortunately, this never happened, so this recycling was not successful, but it was a good idea. This, oh, sorry, can I go back, please? Thank you. So this lady is the founder of our organization. She's a daughter of the factory director, and she spent her childhood there as well. So she was really devoted to this factory and really loved it from the very beginning of her life. So this is the territory of the factory, and in 2010 we turned it into big cultural center, the kind of cultural Disneyland, if you want, because you would have exhibitions here, like residences here. There's a big space for exhibition there, and this is a waste heap here, which is also used for cultural projects. So, you know, if you come there for a day, you would spend the whole day visiting all the exhibitions, movies, libraries, everything. So, yeah, so this is how it looked inside, and you can go next one. Yeah, and this is an example of one of the projects we did. So these are portraits of miners that volunteers, artists from the city made in 2 mines in Donetsk. One set of portraits were made in salt mine, another set of portraits were made in coal mine. So this is a set of portraits that were made by volunteers, local artists. Then famous Chinese artist Tsai Gotian made copies of these portraits on a paper with use of gunpowder. And he made a special sort of gunpowder that recreates different kinds of brushes, so it will explode and burn differently to have different kind of strokes. So the next, please. Yeah, so he would draw these portraits with gunpowder. He would put it on fire and it will explode. And next one, please. And this is the result. We had a big exhibition of portraits made with fire. The group of portraits was put on a pile of coal, and the second group of portraits was put on a pile of salt, representing their workplaces. But the format of portraits represents this banners that would be used on the parades for Communist Party leaders. But instead of leaders, we would have workers, real miners there. So, yeah, this is one of the works that was done by artists from Belgium. Our lipstick on top of a chimney dedicated to women of Donbass who were reconstructing the country after Second World War, because there was not so many men coming back from the war. So women were really strongly involved into reconstruction and work in the mines and the factories. And this is 2014, Russian soldiers destroying this art piece. They shot it on video, uploaded to social media. This is where we found it. Unfortunately, it no longer exists. This space is turned into illegal prison. Illegal prison means that you cannot find who is there. You know, if you will appeal to Russia and you ask, I'm looking for this person, they will never admit that it exists, and they will never tell you who's inside. So it's a really strong and sad story. Unfortunately, as we see it here today, our cultural space is used as this prison, torture room, and execution space right now. There is a website we put together, which is really nice, but unfortunately is dedicated to this sad story. And there is a book by Stanislav Vaseyev, who spent 2 years in that prison. It's translated by Harvard University, and it's available in English. It's also a really strong book. So, yeah, we moved to Kiev and we started our work there with a new hub on a shipyard. And also, a couple of years ago, we started to work with decentralized communities and dedicated our work to Solidar City, which is a small city built around salt mines. You probably heard this name. It was all around news recently because this is a place where Russia put most of their attacks a couple of months ago, and unfortunately now it's occupied. But through last couple of years, we did a great job there, inviting artists, working in local context, making researches in the city and working with the topic of salt mining and salt in general. And this is how we started this project. Regrounding started as an idea to show to British artists, to British producers, British curators, how we work there, how we work with decentralized communities, how we work with small villages, and what we bring them with our cultural work. So this is how we outlined the project from the start. Unfortunately, we cannot go to Solidar now. This is why we put this program together, and this is why we have our great artists in Newcastle today who will tell a little bit more about their practices right now.
I'm going to hand you over in a moment to Lucy, but just a quick background to who Lyudmila Nychai is. So when I had my first visit to Ukraine, we met another brilliant organization called the Congress of Cultural Activists, and met Lucy, who runs residency spaces in Ukraine. So in September, we were lucky enough to have Lucy come over to the UK and stay with us, and she's been our curator-in-residence ever since. So we're going to hand over to Lucy to introduce the artists. Lucy.
Thank you. No, back. Thank you all for coming, and I want to tell what I'm very happy to stay here last 5 months, and thanks of my program with D6 Culture in Transit, I had the opportunity to make my usual work, like the work like curator in residency. I'm very happy and thanks for you, for with all the team of D6. I'm very happy to participate in regrounding program because in the last 8 years I was involved in the different project, art project, educational project, project with a branding of communities in the East Ukraine, and for me it's very nice context. And here I had my own research, and thanks of girls stay here, I maybe open the more new things what I before don't see, maybe don't pay my attention. And today I'm happy present both artists who stay here. We start in the November one week for small research and just to meet what is Newcastle, what is this place, what is this context. And they have a few months for preparing to the 1 month working here in D6. And they create amazing research and create amazing vision in the new project what we preparing maybe in the next fall. Yes, we yes, in autumn we show us and invite all us to the exhibition. But now I want to ask girls to talk about the own discovering what they find here. And at first it's Karolina Uskakovych. It's a first artist. She is designer, artist, and photographer from Kiev, and she currently had her master degree at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague, where she conducted the research on Victory Gardens in the context of Russia's war in Ukraine. Karolina is co-founder of Uzvar Collective. It's a youth artist who get together to collect the money for Ukrainians who are suffering from the war. And art director of the magazine Anthroposphere, the Oxford Climate Review. She also the artist in residence with the Digital Ecologist Research Group and co-founder of research initiative Ukrainian Environmental Humanities Network. Karolina worked with the topic of ecology, traditions, gardening, and community. She mostly worked with the photography and videography, like general mediums, and also use all traditional materials and techniques. Alexandra worked with the subject of mythology, global change, and psychology theories such as archetypes, wellness, and trust. She worked with film photography and analog video, and sometimes she also makes performances. She pays special attention to the places and its history, both of ancient and modern. Alexandra recreate mythological scenarios in her work, as it was in her project. Here comes in the sun in Latvia, and project The Day the Sun Stands Still, filmed on Kam'yana Mogyla in Ukraine. She was born in Donetsk and having this industrial background, but being not able to come back home, she finds herself symbolically reconnected with personal and collective past here in Northumbria. I very happy what we have today, Alexandra and Karo. Welcome, girls, and pass you there. And thank you.
Hey folks, it's amazing to see you here. And before introducing our project and research, we would like to invite you to look at that wall. Because when we came here for the first time, we loved the common room, we loved the theater, old brown wood, nice atmosphere. Although we were observed by million eyes of white old men staring at us from the walls, and we thought, well, the whole hierarchy of the place, the hierarchy of architecture of the place, does not have space maybe for some other actors involved in mining industry. So we decided to change it.
Yeah, so we filled the spaces. There were empty frames on the right corner, 14 of them. And we filled the spaces with some other actors. As you see on the left top, there are coal forests. Basically, this is further material for what we call coal today. And right on the top, there is a little bit controversial character. It's a bacteria called Trichonympha. It evolved in the stomach of termite, and this is why formation of coal stopped during the Carboniferous period and why another era began. Then you can see the prints of fossils on the rocks. So basically the greetings from the ancient past of those plants who died those days. And then on the right, you see the pony, and on the third row from above, on the left, you see the donkey as well. Pit ponies were quite often used in the mines, and once they got underground, they had to spend all their lives there. Yeah, and then you can see two canary bird and the miner holding the canary bird as well. They were used to track if there is a gas accumulated, so they could become sick or die quite quick. So miner can understand the danger and save himself. Yeah, also children were quite involved into the mining industry. Yeah, since 12, 13, it was fine to start the mining career. Yeah, there are even nice memories of 8 years girl Sarah, who was beaten because she fell asleep on her place. And on the this row below, two photographs of women. They were not only supporting their hard-working husbands, but also were working by themselves. And of course, the last two photographs are just miners who were literally digging the coal from the underground. Yeah.
Yeah, and adding these human and other than human beings to the walls, we just made the room more common for our talk. And I would like to jump from this into Alexandra's project about coal.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much. It's such an honor for me to be here with you all tonight. Yeah. So, as it was said, I was born in Donetsk, in eastern Ukraine, and my grandfather was a miner. So my interest in industrial heritage begins from my family background. Basically, my grandfather was working he was building the trucks for coal wagons. Quite a hard job, I would say. This is how that mine where he was working looked like. And I was playing there, but it was already abandoned when I was a kid in the middle 90s. And another spot, which is very meaningful for me, is the old slag heap, where I spent lots of time playing in winter and in summers. Yeah, here is a proof of me in my teenage having fun. As you see, winter time or summertime doesn't matter. You can go to the slag heap, despite all the parents' warnings that it's dangerous there. You can fall and you can be burned and so on. Yeah. So, although the mining industry in post-Soviet Ukraine was quite ruined, and this is how the mine where I was playing looked like in 2011. Although, speaking of Ukraine, we were quite, until recently, we were a third largest producer of coal in Europe. Currently, we have 148 mines in Ukraine. 67 of them, unfortunately, are on the territories temporarily occupied by the Russian terrorists. Yeah, and unfortunately, not many of them are private, and some of them, only 4 of them, considered like beneficial. Now, that made me a little bit stuck. What does it mean? Still, speaking of England, you have a different situation. It seems like all the mines closed, but currently is a new mine going to be open in Whitehaven, as maybe you know. Yeah, so speaking of what was driven my research, there are 4 books which were quite inspiring for me. So I definitely will show them here and recommend you to read. And speaking of the places and things that were inspiring, I'll probably start from Woodford Museum. I went to see the Pittman Painters exhibition. Honestly, it made me very wonder, like, what if my grandfather would have an opportunity to study art within the evening school after his shift in mine? What kind of paintings he would create? Unfortunately, it never happened, but it's nice to think about it. Yeah, I went to the Blast Beach. We don't have any such thing like sea coal. Our coal in Ukraine is quite deep. There is nothing to be washed out so easily by the sea waves. Yes, and of course I was here a few times in the archives of the common room, and I was given even the Davis lamp for my project, and I was able to touch the fossil prints rocks by myself, so I'm very thankful for that. Yeah. So here in Newcastle, I've got a chance to some sort of get symbolically reconnected with my own past, with both personal and collective history, and yeah. No. Yeah, as it was said, I am very interested in mythology and cyclicality of the nature. Oh, I think. Yeah, good. So it's an interesting point that we need a coal exactly when it gets cold, and my interest in how humans relate to the nature. And led me to another question, like how we transform the planet, trying to make the conditions of life on this planet more comfortable for ourselves. Yeah, and that made me think about the work of miner itself. Like, what is that? What is this journey? What is this work that miner has? This relations to the nature when digging the earth in order to get something of it. What is that? What kind of relationship is that? And George Orwell, in his brilliant novel Road to Vegan Pierre, wrote that in the metabolism of the Western world, the coal miner is second in importance only to the man who plows the soil. But it's a strange thing. Like we are not used to take coal as a gift of nature, or we do not really decorate the table by putting coal within the dinner, right? So, yeah, I was continuing to question, what does it mean to go in underground? And since I mostly work with mythology, it reminded me the concept of katabasis, Greek idea of a hero's journey that when it's taken, it is transformative thing itself that usually changes the course of history, and usually a hero goes to the underworld in order to get something, or to rescue someone, or to get some treasure. Yeah. So when the seasons change, we definitely need to get warmer in our houses. And it all reminded me of the myth of Persephone. So, as you might remember, this Greek old legend about how seasons change, that Persephone was abducted by Hades, and has to stay with him in his dark kingdom underground for half of the year. And so I was thinking, what can I do with that? And using the medium of photography, I started to work on the series of photographs, still life photographs, using the common objects from daily life. I'm placing the coal and its related things among the fruits and flowers. So the objects are saturated by its mythological and symbolic meanings, as well as connected to the idea of getting something out of the earth or going underground. For instance, what offerings would be needed to bring Persephone, the queen of underworld, when one goes underground to get some black gold? So what if the miners would have mythological thinking and looking at the global warming situation? I wonder, maybe Persephone is not spending enough time with her husband Hades underground. So also, since most of the miners were quite proud of their job, which was very hard, how would the still life image of the miners' lunch look like if their wives would complement the table by putting the coal to the dinner? So yeah, I also choose the still life. Still life concept because it was considered like second-rate genre, quite low in the whole art genres hierarchy. And exactly when the coal industry was in its peak of development, still life as genre also changed its goal, I would say. And from depicting everyday's pleasure, it started to be a way of analytically understanding things. So usually depicting inanimate objects and gifts of nature, still life was called to reflect on life's hidden and temporary beauty. And I cannot find another thing being hidden so well as the coal, honestly. So yeah, I will continue to work on this series in Ukraine. I want to add more objects of daily life of Ukrainian or Soviet miners, because they are quite different. We have different lamps and helmets, but the coal, I think, quite similar. Yeah, so this is the project I will continue to develop. And another branch of my research went to a little bit another direction. And so on the left side, you can see the coal forest. Basically, so during the Carboniferous period, what happened? It was like massive carbon cycle experiment, and all these plants were sucking carbon from the atmosphere, and by not really fully dying and decomposing themselves, they were storing this solar energy in themselves, which now we are able to use, which we were successfully doing for the last 200 years. And yeah, but now we are moving carbon into the opposite direction. So basically burning it, today we are sending it to the atmosphere. And yeah, so here is a quote of Rebecca Solnit, Orwell's Roses, a book I showed you before. Think of Carboniferous as a 60 million year inhale by plants, sucking carbon dioxide from the sky, and the last 200 years as a monstrous human-engineered exhale, undoing what the plants did so long ago. And here is a very draft, but you can get a glimpse of the video project. It will be a video installation with the music and some poetic elements. It is under development. Yeah. So, for the end, I'd like to quote Orwell again. Our civilization-based Chesterton is founded on coal more completely than one realizes until one stops to think about it. So basically, I hope that all what we are doing here will make us all to stop and think a little bit on what we are standing on and how we can learn from the past to make our future better, to breathe deeply. Thank you. And floor is for Karolina.
Hi again. I would like to start from the project that became a beginning of my whole research. It's a film. I grew up with my grandmother in the city in the central part of Ukraine. We love each other. We're absolutely in love with each other. We have quite strong spiritual bond. My granny's name is Zoya. She's a pensioner who lives quite sustainable rural life in Ukraine, and she leans toward conservative ideas. And I'm that person in a family who moved abroad, started studying art, and nobody knows what I'm doing. Nevertheless, sometimes we have quite some verbal clashes and just some quarrels because of our political and life views. So I started this project as an exploration. How can we find common ground with each other, with ourselves, and with our environment through the practice that we both enjoy, which is gardening. So here is a small timeline of my film. I started it in winter in 2021. I was in the Netherlands when I started my master's. Then I traveled back to Ukraine. We had some amazing time with my granny, talking about life, about gardening, about everything in the world. And then she gave me some tomato seeds from her garden that she harvested from the previous season. And I took them back to the Netherlands. We had to start gardening together in spring 2021. I would do it in the Netherlands, she would do it in Ukraine with her garden. But as you see in the center of the slide, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, and the whole concept of my project changed, because both for me and for my granny, gardening became a completely different practice from what it used to be before. For my granny, it was a source of stability. She knew that whatever happens outside, there is her garden, there are her tomatoes, she can preserve them. She also got some break from all the news and all the social media and all the atrocities that she saw there. And for me, being in the West, completely detached from everything that's going on in Ukraine, was quite hard. And I think the smell of these tomatoes and just the practice itself helped me a lot to reconnect with my motherland, to reconnect with my granny, to reconnect with myself. Then I traveled back to Ukraine, and I filmed a little bit last summer, and I wrote a letter to my future viewers explaining the whole journey and my reflections on this journey. But yeah, the questions of my research completely changed, and I was asking myself why people going back to the land in times of crisis, both immediate crises like war or COVID-19 pandemic, but also long-term but quite present crises of our capitalist reality, of a conventional world that we don't have anymore. And I was wondering what historical events and tendencies influenced the formation of human land and, on the broader scale, human-nature relationships. I started researching the program that was launched in Ukraine in March 2022, which is called Victory Gardens. It's quite similar to what you had here in the UK and also in the US, in Canada during World War I and World War II. Individual farmers, gardeners and communities are encouraged to start gardening, to do food self-provisioning and support themselves. And one of the very nice examples is Buki community. Buki is a small city not far from Kiev. It's famous for its beautiful natural park, and the majority of budget of the city was coming from tourism. But of course, as the war started, nobody was traveling, so they joined the Victory Gardens program, but they were one of the first to join. And they provided 80% of their educational institutions with produce from the communal gardens, but also sent surplus of the produce to members of the communities that went to fight to the east of the country. And even those who didn't hear about about Victory Gardens program responded that 56% of Ukrainians have land and are going to continue gardening on this land in 2022. 9% said that they don't have garden, but they're gonna use their friends or relatives' land plot to participate in food self-provisioning, and 8% said that they have garden, but they're not planning to do any gardening in 2022. Sorry, I didn't mention, it was a questionnaire from independent sociologist group Rating. It was conducted in April. So yeah, food self-provisioning culture in Ukraine is very strong. And I was wondering what exactly fuels it. And I came to the concept of traditional ecological knowledge, which is usually used for indigenous communities, but I put it in a different context to explore it in Ukraine. And ecologist Dr. Firkat Berkas defines traditional ecological knowledge as a cumulative body of knowledge and beliefs handed down through generations by cultural transmission about the relationship of living beings, including humans, with one another and their environment. So basically, traditional ecological knowledge is like a humus of embodied experiences of different people influenced by different historical and cultural events that create this body of communal knowledge. And here how the scheme of my research looks like. I argue that especially during war, Ukrainians discovered the vulnerability of global capitalist food providing system, and also by participating in gardening, by doing this root work, reconnected with their land, reconnected with their historical heritage, and experienced in some way resistance to Soviet and Russian totalitarian systems. And here you see industrial revolution is emphasized. I started from here because in Ukraine, the rise of industrial development happened in the end of 90s, beginning of 20th century, which is much later than in the UK, for example, and it's still in living memory of some Ukrainians, or it handed through generations, but it's quite recent, it's quite fresh. Many Ukrainians were not stoked about the idea of joining industrial development. They were happy to stay in their land plots, live from their land, how their ancestors used to do it. And of course, Soviet government, by means of purges and terror, actually forced them to do it. It resulted in Holodomor, man-made famine, and all other atrocities that came with it. And when I came to Newcastle, it was very interesting for me to kind of look at these two, how Ukrainian ecological knowledge and British ecological knowledge work together. I think that British ecological knowledge is re-embodied because I felt like at some point people kind of divided from the land. They were busy with other things, and now we see the returning of many practices that used to be here before. Oral and mythical. I would say mythical because, again, as like so many generations passed since people actually worked with land directly and it was their main thing, that so many legends and myths grew on top of the knowledge that used to be there before, picked up, again, emphasizes practices that coming back to life. And together with my colleagues and by myself, I visited some communal gardens, some nice sustainable businesses that kind of emphasize the locality. They work with context where they are. And many of them also had some different spiritual elements, like these little creatures. Or, for example, you can see there, it's a tube that shows where the pond is going to be, but for me it also looked like some ritual site. And again, as we're in a city surrounded and divided by headland wall, I got interested in Roman idea of genius loci, which is a spirit of the place, protective spirit of the place. It can be tracked back even further, but in Roman mythology, it appears in the form of a snake and as a symbol of regeneration of life. And I tried to do some experiments with salted dough. As for the autumn, I'm quite happy that we have an exhibition in autumn because I'm working a lot with seasons, I'm working a lot with land, and I would like to spend this time making film in conversation to the film with my granny, and to see how these community gardens or how gardeners here in the UK participate in practices that invite genius loci back to this land. And also I did some material experiments. I was quite interested, again, in like the physical appearance of genius loci in the form of a snake, but also another powerful symbol of regeneration of life is a grain or seed. And bread comes from grain, beer, another very powerful symbol of industry, comes from grain. And grain grows from humus, which is composted, decomposed beans. Yes, that's probably it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and one more thing that we'd like to add is that we already showed you the piece we done together with Karolina, this intervention. And another thing we are going to do before the exhibition opens here in November at the New Bridge Gallery. During the next 8 months, we are going to immerse ourselves into the exploration of grounding techniques. So grounding, as also called earthing, is a therapeutic technique that involves doing activities that ground or electrically reconnect you to the earth. And this practice relies on the earth science that electrical charges from the earth can have positive effects on your body. And yeah, you've heard the name of the project. And following the recommendations on the published in the Health Life magazine.
First link when you Google it, what is regrounding?
Yeah, we will be using different ways to ground our bodies to the earth, to the place where we are. And the technique called grounding, but in our case it will be regrounding because both of us will be doing this not in the native cities, not in the native places. Karolina will be doing this between Newcastle and Hague, and me between Kiev and Helsinki. Yeah, so this poetic nature-engaged interaction will obtain a form of poetic, of video conversation, which you will be able to see in November, I hope.
Thank you. So there's so much there. We've now got a moment to... Oh, thank you, Andrew. It's like you're on the magic hand. We just do this and you make it happen. Does anybody have any questions for the artists? There's so much richness there of what you've been doing and so many details. So come and take a seat here, please. Misha, will you join us as well, please? And Lucy, if there are questions that people might have. Anybody have anything they want to pull out from that rich conversation that we've just had?
I just want to know what happened to the tomato seeds. They grew up with beautiful tomato plants. And I came back to Ukraine. I came back to Ukraine last August to stay with my parents for months. So I gave my plant to my friend from Mariupol, who now lives in The Hague, and she brought her mom to The Hague. It was a huge event for us because her mom couldn't leave for a few months. So they continued my thing. They continued growing my tomatoes, and then we ate them together. Little yellow ones. Thank you.
Do I need to run with a mic? I think we might be recording things. So.
Thank you. No, I mean, we've all watched the horrible news over the last year, and I just wondered how the invasion of, as you say, the Russian terrorists has affected this work. I mean, is this work that you would have done anyway, or has it been much changed by what's happened over the last year?
Is it a question for both of us?
Any of you.
All right. Well, for me it's a little bit tough question because I was born in Donetsk, but I left it when I was 17, and I left it exactly because of its industrial heritage. It was too grim, too dark, gray, and depressive for me there. So I left, and I started to live in Crimea, in Sevastopol, and but in 2014 I had to leave. So I went to Kiev. Well, no, I went to Donetsk first. I saw the Russian tanks twice for that spring. Yeah, and since that time I live in Kiev, and I never came back to Donetsk since 2014. I don't have access to my archives, to my apartment, to my everything, and so yeah, I used to think that I will never get it back, but I think I'll get back the land, Donbas itself. So it's very hard to say. I think this opportunity to make a project here made me, as I said, reconnected, because I was able to leave Donetsk, but I cannot really leave the planet. Like, I cannot really escape always. And for me personally, within this full-scale invasion in February last year, I just realized I don't want to move. I don't want to migrate. I don't want to escape a third time. I'm too tired of it. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered.
I think we wouldn't be here if not all right, because British artists would be there in Solidar doing work there. But yeah, war changed a lot of things. But I think the only thing that accelerated is spreading knowledge about Ukraine, developing our culture. I think as for Russians, it's just going downgrade. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they're doing. And we know who we are. We're rediscovering that. We're remembering who we are. If somebody forgot, now everybody remembered. And we're spreading this knowledge around, which is super cool and nice. Thank you.
Another question up here somewhere. Thank you. So I suppose for me what's been really interesting has been having, I guess, the question around the practice being part of a continuum that you're working on. So it's something you were working on as ideas previously, especially you, Karo, and the work that you were doing, and it's something that you will continue doing as you take this idea forward into the next iteration of your own working practice. You will come back to the UK. You're coming back in the autumn, and there'll be a bit of time again before the exhibition comes together. So can I maybe hear a little bit just about the Finnish journey that you're doing? And I guess then from you, Karo, just around the continuation of the research that you're doing that's so interesting.
Oh, sorry. Do I have two? We have two. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Well, in my case, I have a certain plan. I mean, I plan to continue to make this photo series I've started. It must be filled by more Ukrainian stuff, I feel, because like the pits were connected between themselves underground. In the same way, things are connected. I mean, exploiting and abusive attitude to the earth in mining industry does not differ much in England or Ukraine. Yeah, so I will continue this photo series, and also I plan to go to a slag heap somewhere in Ukraine. You do not have anyone. I was a little bit upset, but you've done a really good job regarding dealing with all the sequences of the mine industry. Yeah, so I plan to go to the slag heap in Ukraine. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if I can go far in eastern Ukraine, but I'm pretty sure I will find a good slag heap somewhere in the central Ukraine. We still have quite a lot. Yeah, and I plan to make a performative video there of me digging the waste, kind of metaphorically reenacting what my grandfather was doing. So he was digging the coal with a very functional purpose, very strict one. And I will be doing quite absurdic job trying to find in a waste mountain something. And I think the whole idea of of resurrecting the mining industry and opening new mines is absurdic as well. It's like trying to find an abusive attitude, something nice, and justify it in a weird way. Yeah, so, and as I said already about our collaborative piece on the regrounding our bodies to the earth. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also planning to be going forth and back from The Hague to Newcastle and film pieces and beats of the process of growing, the growing of the communities, the growing of this plant that they're doing. Yeah, I connected with Wild Root Community Garden, with Scotswood Garden, with Comfrey Project, and I spoke to some Ukrainians who started their gardens here. Unfortunately, not that many people who fled war from Ukraine. I think it's quite hard to find somebody who already engaged in this practice because, you know, everything is so precarious, everything marked by, you know, temporarily, like you're here temporarily, maybe for 3 years, maybe for less, maybe for more. But yeah, and about our collaborative project, yeah, we're gonna go barefoot, we're gonna jump into water, we're gonna cover ourselves with a metal wire. That's going to be experimental.
Many electrical charges from the earth.
Yes, here and then here.
It's just in response to your slag heaps. There's still some slag heaps. There's some quite local. Sorry.
Are they visible?
Yeah, there's a big slag heap between Leamington and Newburn, which is like that way west of the town, but it's also been covered with trees and grass, so it's been kind of reclaimed, but you can still see the earth is black. You know, you can still see, you don't have to dig very far to get it if you're interested. Cool. And then something else that you said just towards the end, you were talking about learning from the past in order to understand how we deal with the future. there's a saying on the Durham Miners banner which says, "The past we inherit, the future we build." And I don't know if you managed to get time to go down to the Durham Miners in Red Hills and sort of speak to people there, but they've got a rich history there as well.
Well, regarding this slag heap, why I haven't met you before? I was asking people here at the common room, and I was asking people working at the Woodhorn Museum, and everyone I've met, like, is there any slag heap? Tell me. And not really, but maybe very old that you cannot really see from the first glimpse. Yeah, but I should write it down maybe next time. Yeah, because I'm leaving next Monday, already heading to the Kiev back. And about the sea coal and Durham, I went to the Blast Beach only. I haven't been to any collieries in Durham. Yeah, but I've heard there's even a art community based, like, which is focused exactly on this subject. So yeah, that would be very interesting to learn more from them. It was, I mean, I'm very satisfied by this residency program, but it was only a month here. So I feel like I should start working like properly full-time job on this subject, you know. It's not enough 1 month. Yeah, but thank you.
Thank you very much for this amazing journey. I used to be a researcher in my normal Ukrainian life, but I never thought that it's possible to put together researches and arts. And it was really, for me, it was really amazing. And I'm quite far from gardening, sorry, but I'm much more closer to coal mining because I used to work with coal mining local authorities in Ukraine. And you know, you were talking about abusing attitude towards land and how humans treat land. But for me, your pictures are so nice and so amazing. So I'm just wonder how you plan to stress this abusive attitude, because it's just a piece of art for me.
Well, you know, this is maybe like in this Vanitas still life paintings, when you put the skull onto the other objects, and you don't really want to see skulls everywhere, right? But on the painting it looks quite nice. So probably my goal here is to make people stop and see and think. So to contemplate. I believe that in contemplation we can come to real conclusions about what is going on. And also, like, putting something into the frame, some sort of like symbolically trying to finish the era, you know, like kind of, yeah, make it already done, already something in the past that already is not here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to the event in November.
The exhibition is going to be at the Newbridge project. We're going to let you all know about it.
Thanks. I'm not sure if I was scratching my head or asking for a question, but first of all, congratulations on what you shared. That's all fantastic. On the logo slide that we saw before for the project, I think it had a subtitle, An Artistic Response to the Climate Crisis. And I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about how the work you've been doing forms a response to that, and what's added in particular by a response that's artistic as opposed to any other kind.
Well, I'm working with gardening and food self-provisioning, and I think that's already quite a powerful response to ecological crisis, especially being acquainted with the context of the Netherlands that provide all Europe with this like plastic food that is grown, you know, like on the walls or like on fish poo. They do that instead of soil. I also speak how important it is actually to kind of like learn something from people who did it before us, who connected to the land and received quite nice fruit. And we're now growing stuff on walls, but the results and fruits are not that good.
Installation with breathing sky. I think it's very much about climate response. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, how can we move forward if we are not really aware of what we were doing before and what kind of result it brought to us? And well, coal is the most polluted fossil fuel, and it may be only seen that in England is already done, and it's a kind of already the common room instead of the mining institute. But the new mine is going to be open here, and I would take I would keep my eye on it, honestly. I don't really like this tendency. I mean, I cannot really help here. I have many mines in Ukraine where people are working, more hard, solid questions. But yeah, I think that bringing more attention to the subject, that it's not in the past yet, must help at least a bit. We deal with self-awareness, after all.
Yeah, well, for our organization, topics of climate change and environment have been really important from the very beginning, because we started to work in the region with a huge decline of industry. So, you know, even in 2010, 2012, it was full of abandoned mines, factories, a lot of polluted land and things like this. So we wanted to use means of arts and culture to reach people, to explain why it's important to look at this and why it's important to do something with this. And then, of course, when I started residency, we didn't know what will happen, because, you know, we had an open call, we had a lot of applications, and the artists who we selected together with the six. But we look at the artists as the pioneers, as the people who in avant-garde of change in society, because they can talk to people, they can show what's important, they can show the future and how it can be made. You know, lots of artists are building beautiful utopian images, then us average people are picking little bits of them and incorporating this in our lives. So you know, again in Ukraine, artists have this really unique position where they have a voice. They provide change, they do research, they replace a lot of institutions that should be represented by the state, but instead active people, active artists are doing this job instead of them. So yeah, I think this is why this is work of artists on topics connected to climate change. This is important to our organization. This is why we organize this residency.
Thank you. Yes, Roz.
I was just wondering what opportunity there might be for this work eventually or at some stage to be seen in Ukraine. And also, could you talk a bit about the significance, if you see there is significance, in this kind of partnership for the cultural scene in Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I will probably answer this. First of all, of course, it will be really important to have this presented in Ukraine. And just a couple of years ago, we decided not to work in Kiev, in the capital, instead start working in smaller communities around the country. And this is where it's important, and this is where we are making real impact. So obviously, when the war is over, the topics of reconstruction of Donbass, of the east of Ukraine, would be extremely important. And we want to, you know, this reconstruction to be done not by big industrial. obviously this will happen. Big developers will do this, but we also want the voice of artists and the voice of communities be heard into this, so that people will have this participative practices. They will ask people what they want, and this is frankly what we've been doing for the last couple of years. You know, we did a big plan of reconstruction of Solidar, for example, and people are really strongly debated local authorities on what they want and what in reality local authorities are doing, which is a really big change in Ukraine. You know, during long 80 years of Soviet rule, it was impossible to influence any decision done by government. So people were really, you know, they lost their energy. They didn't wanted to propose anything to the government because they knew that no one will listen. And this is something that we are fighting with. So representing this kind of projects also will build a new perspective and also put an accent on what is important, how their construction should happen, what we should do in future with the region. And of course, this kind of collaboration with Newcastle, with north of England is really interesting, really important, because as I said at the beginning, the change that already happened here is huge, and it's really different from what's going on in Europe. You know, in European Union, in Germany, for example, and in Belgium, they are using factories as museums. They have this process of reconstruction of old industrial spaces into cultural spaces. And instead here, they are demolished. There are parks built instead. Like, thank you so much for the tour around land of coal and iron, and it's a beautiful place. And you know, there is a lot of place to argue what is better, but still it's really important to know about these approaches, how they work, how they influence people, and this knowledge we will take to the east and we'll use for reconstruction.
Well, we have got our share of industrial cultural spaces here as well, but that's nice to hear that the examples of reclaiming the land are positive ones. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask another question? Okay, well, on that note, I'm going to say is there any wine left outside? Or is that gone? There's some out there still. Okay. So you're welcome to stay for another glass of wine here. We are going to go, some of our team are going to go back to D6. I think you all know where it is. If you don't, come and ask one of us. Can we have the D6 team put their hands up? Obviously me. Anybody else? So you can find out where we're going. We've got some beautiful catering done by some of the Ukrainian community who are living in the region. So it's essential that you come back and you test it with us. It's there. We'll go prepare it. Please come back. Can I say thank you so much? Thank you so much for that interesting journey. You know, intriguing having you with us. 1 month isn't enough. And, you know, it's just not enough. It's not enough. But, you know, we're glad that you're coming back. Oh, something else I was going to say that's completely gone. Oh, yeah. So you will be back in the autumn. The exhibition will be at the Newbridge Project. There will be an opportunity for you to present your work at the Ukrainian Institute in London as well. So delighted that you're going to have a public display. Please follow the project. Keep in touch. We will invite you when the moment comes. But for now, thank you so much. Hang around and carry on. Thank you.
And thank you so much. And thank you so much, Klimenit.